reconcile that in our heart. But I also thought that it would be good to hear a man's perspective because I think we all want to know what their thoughts about it is, their feelings and things like that about it is. So I don't think that I have to give Imam Shadi an introduction. I think everybody here knows him, follows him. So I'm not going to hold the floor any longer. Imam Shadi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin, I want to kind of set the mood a little bit. We got a couple of brothers. I called some brothers, so hopefully some more brothers will show up. And as she mentioned, is oftentimes polygyny is oftentimes a subject that is very taboo in the American Muslim community, not just in the Islamic African American Muslim community, but in the American Muslim community. Period. It's a very taboo subject. Just the mere mention of the word polygyny in certain circles will have people looking at you sideways, literally, both brothers and sisters. And I'm one of those people, like, I don't mind controversy. I don't, as you can see. I don't mind it. I'm comfortable with who I am and where I stand. And I welcome the differences of opinions. I welcome, I know there's some women, I can kind of feel it as I'm walking in different places today. Women are looking at me very sideways right now because it's like, well, why are you promoting polygyny when brothers can't even maintain one marriage, one wife? And here you are, promoting, brothers taking more than one wife. And I don't know. Is there anyone who feels like that here right now? Yeah, no, raise your hand. I have no problem with that. Well, not necessarily. Well, that's another thing that people don't really understand, that me being in polygyny is promoting it. And I travel with my family. I travel with my wives on the Eid and Jumu'ah and things like that. It's very normal to see me get out of a truck and all three of my wives get out of the truck with me. That's very normal. It's normal to see me get out of a car and one wife is in passenger seat and another wife is in the back seat. That's very normal for me. All right. It's not normal for many men in the community, and that's not me showboating. Right. That's not me showboating. Quiet is kept. That was me before I became Muslim, which is why I felt so comfortable doing it in Islam. It was just second nature to me. It was almost like this was what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed specifically for me, because that's how I was before I became a Muslim. And I mean, like, I'm not afraid to address those issues. Men, we sometimes get embarrassed when we become Muslim to, hide the fact that, you were a player, you had multiple women. I'm ashamed at the fact that I used women objectified them for my own personal. And Islam helps us to, refine our outlook on women and see them as human beings with needs and, emotionally, sexually, financially, just as we have. And that removes the whole objectification part from it. And to see them as human beings that have needs, that have wants, and puts the responsibility on the man to make sure that he supplies the women with those needs. So in Islam, although, polygyny is an allowance, it is also a responsibility that comes with a heavy burden of accountability, if in fact it is not done in the proper way. All right. So, that's just basically to get us started. So I don't mind if there are women out there that are listening now that kind of feel like, I'm kind of messing the game up, right? Because I'm putting brothers on to polygyny. Then, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to lose no sleep. Trust me. I sleep well at night. I don't lose any sleep over that. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today before we, kind of get into the whole issue of polygyny. Is number one, I was on my way here. I was thinking about some of the things that I wanted to address. And one of the things that I want to talk about is that people, especially second, third generation Muslims, they look at polygyny as a convert thing, right? They look at polygyny as like this convert thing that, he must be a convert, right? And when I hear that, what it says to me is that converts are the only ones that come into Islam and seem to kind of find things about the religion that were like buried underneath the dirt from the Muslims that were already here, that you just didn't want us to find. And then here along comes this convert and stumbles across something and then just kind of revives it. And then it's like, oh, he must be a convert. You know, it's like converts, they take things so literal and so serious. You know, the Muslim community would be better off had these converts not come into Islam and stumble across these things and revive these things and upset the social norm, right, of our society. I don't know. Do you guys get that? How many of you guys are converts? I mean, all of us converted at some point, but our first generation converts. 2, 3. I'm a convert. You know, I converted to Islam 20 years ago. All right. And I can tell you from the time that I converted until now, the American Muslim community wasn't all that great. I don't know if you thought it was. Right? We used to have Eids in the park and nobody wore black and nobody talked about this Salafi stuff, and all of this new stuff came along and destroyed the Muslim community. I'm sorry. The Muslim community was already in shambles. It was already in shambles going back from the 70s when most of you guys transitioned from the Nation of Islam or from the War of Deen community, right, into what is called Sunni Islam. There were a lot of steps that were missed along that way, evidenced by the fact that many of the Muslim community lost 2-3 generations of their children. That wasn't due to converts who converted to Islam. That had to do with the transition, and a lot of things were lost in that process. You know, the going from wearing the khimar with behind the ears with your earrings showing to wearing all black, and then you're not teaching your children exactly why that transition happened, and you know, the proper way of covering, and your daughters were left to kind of figure it out for themselves and just became overwhelmed with the transition and decided, you know what, to hell with all of this. The boys, the Muslim boys, we coming home and we're saying TV is haram, music is haram, after we was just partying yesterday, right? We were just snapping our fingers and partying, you know, Muslims, partying. And then we come home tomorrow and say, all right, no more TV. TV is haram, music is haram, and we're going to live this, you know, ascetic lifestyle without explaining, without going through the proper process and the proper channels. And then our sons were like, you know what, this is a little too extreme for me. I'm going to keep the Islamic culture. I'm going to cut the pants above the ankles. I'm going to grow my beard. I'm going to have a nice little shape up. I'm going to wear my kufi back so everybody can see how cool I am. But I'm still going to sell drugs. I'm going to still smash women. I'm going to still do me, right? But I'm going to keep the culture of Islam. So this whole thing, this whole idea that, you know, converts were the ones that came in and kind of destroyed the Islamic community, I'm sorry. The American Islamic community was already in shambles. Converts, what they did was they came to Islam and they saw loopholes in the Muslim community, and they began to fill those loopholes with what they believed was real Islam. And provided they didn't have, you know, the culturing and the nurturing that needed to go along with that. So as a result of that, there was an extreme element that came along with that, right? Right or wrong. And I was a part of that as well. When I came into Islam, of course, you come in, you know, like the sun. You just want to illuminate. You want to shine because you found something that you believe is the truth. But there was no cultivating. There was no nurturing that energy, and that energy, like any other energy, when there is no restraints around it, it goes full speed ahead, and it burns. It hurts. And we're dealing with that now, the post ramifications of, you know, these different movements and this different energy that came in and out of our community. So polygyny is not a convert thing. It's an Islamic thing. The Prophet ﷺ practiced polygyny. Abu Bakr was in polygyny. Umar was in polygyny. Ali was in polygyny. All of these great men that we, you know, talk about, we never talk about the fact that they were in polygyny. We never talk about the fact that when the Prophet ﷺ died, right, we always talk about he was married to Khadijah for 25 years and he didn't marry any other woman, right? So, as I addressed that before, let me do that again, because you have this Muslim woman feminist movement, and now that is plaguing our community, right? And this is one of the arguments that they use to discredit the concept of polygyny. That the Prophet ﷺ, and you have even Muslim men who now have bought into this discourse and have now begun to propagate and promote this idea that the Prophet ﷺ was married to Khadija for 25 years and never married anyone else. Well, when you look at the Islamic community at the time, that the 25 years that he was married to Khadija, the Muslim community during that time was not in a position of building families. It was a time of survival. This was the 13 years that he was married in Mecca, for the first 10 years, he was married to Khadija, right? The first 10 years of his prophethood, he was married to Khadija. She died the 10th year after he received revelation. So for that 10 years, was that the time of building families? We're talking about Muslims being tortured and persecuted, and Muslims migrating from Mecca to Ethiopia. Sumayya, the first martyr in Islam, being killed. You had Bilal and Suhaib and Miqdad ibn Aswad and many of the Sahaba who were being tortured on a daily basis. This was not the time to marry multiple women to build a family, to build a large, to expand the family structure, which is the essence of polygyny. It wasn't the time for that. But when the Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina, and they were in a more Islamically conducive environment where they could, entertain, the verses that were revealed about building families and building communities, then that was the time for marrying multiple women. That is why he married multiple women during that time. I mean, you guys following me? So when we say, oh, he didn't marry, any other woman while he was married to Khadija, it wasn't necessarily out of respect for Khadija. I never heard any scholar say that the Prophet ﷺ did not marry another woman while he was married to Khadija out of respect for Khadija. I've never heard that interpretation. And unless someone can correct me, you got Tafsir Ibn Kathir, you got many books of Sirah, Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, and many books of Sirah that, that have documented and recorded this time period. I've never read any scholar say that the Prophet ﷺ did not marry another woman while he was married to Khadija out of respect for Khadija. But what I do know is that it wasn't the time for polygyny. It wasn't the time for marrying multiple women. That didn't happen until later on. And you can look at many of the other Sahaba who were married to multiple women. That happened later on, right? That happened later on in the Medina period. So this whole idea that, polygyny, monogamy is the standard, right? As George Bernard Shaw, he said that that to associate monogamy with civility is the greatest error that the human being has ever adopted, the worst flaw in our understanding as human beings is to associate monogamy with morality. That because we're a monogamous society, that means that we are somehow more moral than any other society. But when you look at ancient African societies, ancient Asian societies that did practice polygyny, you would never see the immorality that we see here today in this so-called monogamous society that we live in. You would never see the immorality going on in those societies. Africa has been practicing polygyny, has been alive and well in Africa, in parts of Africa, way before the advent of Islam. Islam didn't come to establish, polygyny. Polygyny was already being practiced before Islam. What Islam did was to regulate, the men to 4 women, and then put certain guidelines and parameters around how women should be treated in this institution of polygyny. But it did not come to permit it. It was already being practiced well before Islam. And that's another myth that people have, that, Islam is the culprit, right? Islam is the culprit because Islam is the one that came and established polygyny. But when you look at the ancient texts before the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, you will find that prophets like Suleiman, had multiple wives. You had many prophets that had many wives. Right? Suleiman had 100 wives. This is documented in an authentic hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, Prophet Suleiman said that I'm going to go around to all of my wives in one night, and every single one of them is going to get pregnant and give birth to a male child that will fight fi sabilillah. And he didn't say inshallah, right? And so what happened? He went around to his wives. He was intimate with 100 women in one night. Can you imagine that? There's no masculinity on the face of the earth today that can match that. Right? Even for brothers who are in polygyny. Right? Because we think that when we go into polygyny, sometimes we're overestimating ourselves. I got 3 or 4 wives, and then when those 3 are, what we don't realize is that the older a woman gets, the greater her sex drive becomes. And it's the opposite with men. The older we come, our libido begins to decrease, not increase. Right? So while we're priding ourselves on having multiple women also comes with sexual responsibilities as well. Right? And if you're not satisfying one wife, then, it probably would not be a good idea, to go in. And I mean, so the one thing is that prophets before Islam had multiple wives. And not only that, it also speaks to the sexual prowess that Allah has given some men more than others. The Prophet ﷺ, he would go around to all of his wives in one night. Some men are just built like that. Allah created them like that. They have high sexual drives. That's just the nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. So if a man is married to one woman with a great sexual drive, is he supposed to suppress that just to, in this society, he is. You need to learn some discipline. You need to learn self-control. Don't you know that there are animals in the animal world that know that they have to reproduce, but they know in reproducing they are going to die. Animals that know that when they reproduce, they are going to die. Just imagine this animal trying to preserve his life by suppressing that sexual urge. It's not going to happen. These urges cannot be suppressed. But in this society, a man is taught, okay, you have a high sex drive. Okay, whatever. Learn how to have some discipline. All right. And the moment that he steps out on his wife, either because, sometimes we're not aware that women, they have issues. They have some women have issues, just like men have issues that affect their ability to be, sexually effective. They have issues just like men have issues. There's a period of time, sometimes from 7 to 10 days in a month, where a man is not able to be intimate with his wife. And then when you factor in other issues that go on, maybe a woman just doesn't have a high sex drive. Sometimes women are molested. Sometimes in their childhood, things have happened to them that have created this, lack of desire for sex. But we don't know that because a lot of times we're not that transparent during the sit-down process. So we're marrying a person, right? And during the sit-downs that I've conducted with couples, that is one of the questions that I ask. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself sexually? Absolutely. It's very important to have that discussion. Because if you are going in with the expectation that I'm going to marry this woman and we're going to just have sex, 2-3 times a day, and she's okay with just having it once a week, there's obviously going to be a problem here. Or vice versa. If the woman is going into a marriage looking, and this is very important because you have a lot of older brothers who want to marry younger women. A lot of older brothers who want to marry younger women are not aware that the fact that marrying a younger woman comes with, some sexual responsibilities. And once a week is not going to cut it. Twice a week is not going to cut it. And, all of the Viagra and the pills in the world is not going to, restore, So, those are some things that, we need to understand. Anas, radiallahu anhu, he said, we used to say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had the strength of 40 men. We used to say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the strength of 40 men. So there are some men that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let me ask you guys, let me just throw the question out there. So let's say a scenario where a man has a high sex drive. And he's married to a woman who, only wants to be intimate maybe once or twice a week. But he needs it at least twice or 3 times a day. What is a man to do in a situation like this? Is he to just divorce her and then move on and marry somebody else?
Pray for patience.
Pray for patience? Okay. Pray for patience. But when you say pray for patience, here again, we're talking about suppression. All right? And expression is as a result of suppression. What does that mean? That means that anytime you see someone that is expressing a particular behavior, all right, sometimes you have people who are gothic, they have black lipstick on, black eyeshadow, black hair. This is a form of expression. You have some people who come off like weirdos, right? Sorry to use the term, I mean, in the hood, that's what we refer them to. These people who are just like natural type of people, they, have dreads and, they smoke a lot of marijuana, these type of people, and they come off, to people from where I'm from, they come off as weird, right? This is a form of expression. All right, you have women who dress a certain way or act a certain way. Those are forms of expression. A lot of times, those forms of expression is as a result of them suppressing something else. It's as a result. The young boy who wears his pants, all the way down here so you can see his underwears. He has tattoos on his neck and tattoos on his face. That is a form of expression. An expression as a result of suppression. So it's very dangerous. When you suppress something, it will eventually, come to the forefront. And sometimes in ways that are not healthy. All right. So, for example, a woman who is, domestically abused by a man, she's taught to suppress her emotions. We do it to our children. We'll spank the child, and when the child cries, we'll tell them, you better not cry. Shut up. Shut your mouth. After you just beat the child. And now you tell them to shut up. So basically what you're telling them to do, you're teaching them, right, to suppress their emotion. This same child, when they grow up and they're in a domestically abusive situation, they don't speak out against the emotional abuse, against the husband may be verbally abusive, husband may be emotionally abusive, the husband may be physically abusive. They don't speak out against it because they were taught as a child to suppress their emotions, not to say anything. You guys following me? Very dangerous, man. Very dangerous. So expression is as a result of suppression. So even if you prayed for patience, that Allah give me patience with this, and you suppress that, it's going to manifest in other ways that may not necessarily be healthy, in terms of maybe looking at porn, maybe masturbation, and all of these other things that are not healthy. How is masturbation not healthy?
Because you're slowing down the birth process.
No. One male ejaculation is enough to populate the whole world. Did you know that? That's actually one of the things I cite in my book by a man named Robert Wright. He wrote a book called The Moral Animal. All right. One male ejaculation is enough to populate the whole world. Just one man. That's how many sperm cells are released with one ejaculation. Enough to populate the whole world. Right? Assalamu alaikum. All right, so, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. All right, so you're talking about masturbation. Why is this a bad thing? Why is this dangerous? And for those of you who are online, I want you guys to, if you have children, adult children or teenage children, they should listen to this as well. Because sometimes we live in a society where we're taught that masturbation is okay, to do it 2-3 times a day. What happens? I'm not talking about the physical effects of masturbation. I'm talking about the psychological effects of it. All right? The psychological effects of masturbation is that you have a heightened sense of dopamine coming through your system. This is the chemical that the body releases when you are engaging in a sexual act, right? So when you have, it's just like when a person is, for example, I hate to use this example, nonetheless, it's real talk. If a person is smoking one blunt a day, right, and he does that for a substantial amount of time, eventually the one blunt a day does nothing for him anymore. He's become accustomed to it. So what happens after he does one blunt a day? He got to go to 2 or 3. And once he starts smoking 2 or 3 blunts a day, and it doesn't do anything for him, what does he do? He goes to heroin. Or he starts to mix the marijuana with cocaine because he needs a higher high. He has been desensitized. So when a man masturbates on a constant basis, he is desensitizing himself to the actual act of sex. And as a result of that, he requires a higher high. So when he goes to be intimate with a woman, it does nothing for him. You have some men that cannot be intimate with their wives unless they are watching porn, because they have desensitized themselves so much that sexual relations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated between man and woman do absolutely nothing for him. And this is the same thing with watching porn. It does the same exact thing. You're on a stimulated overload, and therefore you need a higher high. This is not doing it for you anymore. Very, very important for us to not to play with these emotions, man, not to play with these feelings. Yes.
So is it against Islam?
You have some scholars who say that it's not haram. If in fact it will stop a person from committing fornication, then, and I'm not advocating that, I would say don't do it. But here again, we're talking about suppression. So if a person is not married, let's take a 20-year-old African-American male who lives in the inner city, all right, just became Muslim, all right, is done with the girlfriend-boyfriend thing, trying to, walk the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, right? Every day he steps out of his door, there are girls on the corner with short shorts on. It's summertime, this one has this. He's a handsome guy. He's being called from so many different angles. The whole idea of be patient that's unrealistic. That's unrealistic in that situation. He goes to work, and the work environment, he's surrounded by women. The same type of women, although they're clothed differently because they're at work, they're the same women from the neighborhood that he's from. Telling him to be patient is not going to solve the problem. Sometimes in the Islamic community, we use patience as like this band-aid solution to everything. Just be patient, brother. Just be patient, sister. Right? Sister comes and she wants some solid advice. My husband is this and this is happening in my home. And the imam says, sister, be patient. Nah, be patient is not sufficient in that situation. You're putting a band-aid over an open wound that is bound to get soiled in blood. It's not going to suffice. The scholars have a maxim in Islam, and which is basically a principle, and that is a dhulm yurfa, that oppression is removed immediately. When a person is in an oppressive situation, they have to be removed from that situation immediately. Because being in an oppressive situation, it infringes on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a woman is being abused, or a man is being, physically or emotionally abused, right? How are they going to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the type of khushu' that is required of them in order for the prayer to have the desired effect? They can't. So oppressive situations have to be removed. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ encouraged his companions to go to Ethiopia, because remaining in Mecca under those circumstances, it was self-defeating. It was self-defeating. Counterintuitive, because they're not going to be able to benefit from prayer or fasting or anything else under those conditions. So they have to remove themselves from that environment altogether. All right, so, it's very important for us to understand, the ramifications of, these suppressing these emotions. So I'm not necessarily saying that if a guy has a high sex drive that he has to go and marry another wife. But what I am saying is that polygyny is there as an alternative. Sometimes as men, we use polygyny as our solution go-to. Right? We having problems with one wife. All right, you're not going to act right. I'm just going to marry somebody else. That's not the solution either. But we're using polygyny in the wrong manner. So polygyny has now become, the boogeyman for the sisters. So every sister is afraid that the husband is going to, at some point, throw polygyny out there, right? And now she has to deal with that. Right, so she's on her best behavior, not because she wants to please Allah or she wants to set a good example for her daughters, right? She's on her best behavior because she knows if she fouls up in this marriage, her husband is going to throw polygyny in her face, and then she has to deal with that, right or wrong? So using polygyny as this kind of threat that I'm going to do this, I'm going to marry another woman, and this is all out of frustration, because as men we want control. So we'll use divorce. I'm going to put you in iddah, right? That's the best that you can come with. Including myself. I'm guilty of that as well, because I didn't grow up with a father. I didn't grow up in a home where, my parents were married, right? I didn't grow up in that type of environment. So we're left to kind of just figure it out as we move along. We see the void that is in our lives and we know what not to do, but we don't know what to do. You follow me? So as men growing up in homes like this, we get married in Islam. We don't necessarily know what to do. We know what not to do because we've seen, the void that has, our own family structure has created in our lives. So we know what not to do. I'm not going to be absent in the life of my children the way that my father was absent in my life. But how do I become a father? How do I be a good father, an effective father? That we haven't gotten to that chapter yet. We're kind of figuring that out as we go along. All right. So the same thing applies to marriage. So we want control. To some degree, that control is our right. That we have some level of control over our situation. There was a discussion that went on on a radio station in Philadelphia yesterday, and it was called Toxic Masculinity. Toxic masculinity. And they were basically talking about the guy who just killed the older gentleman on Facebook and how he used his girlfriend as, the premise for that action. That his wife, I think her name was Joy, that, he was asking everybody, do you know Joy? Or you don't know Joy? Well, I'm going to do this to you because of Joy. Right? So they were saying that this is toxic masculinity, meaning because this man did not have control over his situation, he's going to lash out on or at someone else. And although I don't necessarily agree with the term, right, because it's very suggestive, however, I understand that does exist. It does exist. That men sometimes, especially as African-American men, we believe that when we don't have control over a situation, then we have to use aggression. We have to become aggressive until we have control over the situation. And when we do that, we don't necessarily have control. You put a person in fear, that's not control. And what we should have in Islam, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us as men, is not control. Allah uses the word qawama as maintenance. You are the maintainers. He didn't say the controllers of your wives, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Arrihumma hadha qasmi fima amlik fala tulumni fima la amlik." He said, "Oh Allah, this is my distribution amongst my wives and the things that I have control over. So don't hold me accountable for the things that I don't have control over." And he was talking about his heart. You don't even control your own heart. How are you going to control the heart of somebody else? How? You don't even have control over your own heart. The Prophet said, "Oh Allah, this is my distribution amongst my wives and the things that I have control over," meaning his wealth and his time. He says, so don't hold me accountable for that which I have no control over and you have full control over, meaning my heart, meaning which one of my wives my heart inclines towards more than the other. I don't have control over that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has control over that. So we're essentially, jazakallah khair, we're essentially, frustrated. And then we'll use divorce. I'm going to put you in iddah. Say it again and I'm going to divorce you. And it's just, it's an indication, it's indicative of our weakness as men because we're not strategic to find another way to get the woman to, to acquiesce. And to just, to be in that moment, to live underneath, those, circumstances, with cohesion and harmony. So we have to force her hand by threatening her with divorce or even worse, threatening her with polygyny. So I'm just going to marry another woman. So what do you think that does to the woman now? She hates polygyny. Right or wrong. I'm listening real reasons why many of our sisters hate polygyny. It's not because of polygyny itself, but men have abused and objectified polygyny so much that we've caused our women to hate it. So now we use it as a means to make the woman conform. Oh, well, you're not going to do this? Well, I'm just going to go marry another woman. You want your wife to do something sexually for you? She says, nah, I'm not doing that. All right, well, then I'm going to go marry another woman and she's going to do it for me. Even if it's joking, it puts us as men in a place of privilege where we can just throw that out there like that. And the woman has to just accept it. And when a woman says, well, if you marry another woman, then I'm out. I don't want any parts of this. And it's like, oh, you got a problem with polygyny. You need to take that to your Lord, right? It's like, subhanAllah, it's not, I don't have a problem with polygyny. But look at the way that you're using it. This is an allowance, right? Make no mistake about that. Polygyny is a rukhsa, is an allowance that Allah gave the man, provided he meets a certain criteria.
It shouldn't be a weapon.
It's not a weapon. It's not a weapon to be used. And divorce, likewise, is not a weapon to be used by a man that is weak within himself and can't find another strategic way to make his wife acquiesce. Or to just learn how to accept that this is who she is. And just accept that. That's who you marry. You should have did more research. You're stuck with her. It is what it is. These things should force us to do more research. Huh? What'd you say? Stuck. Maybe I shouldn't have said stuck. Language is powerful though. And you can see how something as simple as me saying stuck can resonate with somebody in a very negative way. Words are very powerful. So if I said something as simple as you are stuck with her, and it could rub somebody the wrong way, what do you think it does to a woman when a man says, well, I'm gonna just marry somebody else. I'm gonna marry a second wife. I'm gonna put you in polygyny. I mean, like we say that from a place of privilege, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that. And we're abusing that position that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Someone said the bad things is that most Muslims who are not religiously educated tend to abuse the religion. Yeah, that's true. It is abuse. It is abuse. Hurt people hurt people. We've been abused. So we're going to, project that abuse on other people. That's what we do. So, polygyny is not to be used in that manner, in that fashion. None of the Prophet ﷺ's companions, nor did he marry another woman because one wife wasn't acting right. I don't even know what that means. She's not acting right. Right? We have to change the language. No, I'm serious. Like, when younger brothers come with this language, she not acting right. What does that mean? Come on, Ak, you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. You have to explain that, because that's a different language. I don't speak that language. I don't speak that language. So you need to, I'm going to put her in idda. What does that mean? Put her in idda. What does that mean? What is idda? That's the waiting period. Okay, so you're going to put her in a waiting period? Does that even make sense? You're going to put her in a waiting period so that you can decide whether or not you want to marry her or not? And you're already married to her? Does that even make sense? We have to correct the language. Language is powerful. Language is very powerful. When Jibreel came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, Iqra, read. Read. It's powerful. The first thing Allah created was what? The pen. Write. Read. Write. Don't you see where I'm going with this? Don't you see how important education is in our religion? It's important. There's a whole surah in the Quran named Surah Al-Qalam, the surah of the pen. A whole surah, a whole chapter in the Quran named after the pen. This is very important. So, wherever there's a lack of education, there's going to be a lack of abuse of these things. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that, women kind of look at this book and think that, this is, me promoting polygyny. In a sense it is. But in another sense, it's not necessarily promoting it, but it's helping women to understand why. The why. Why does a man need another woman? Why does a man want or desire another woman even though he has a good woman at home? Why did Jay-Z cheat on Beyonce? I'm just keeping it real with you. Why did Carmelo Anthony cheat on Lala? I'm throwing contemporary issues out there because these are women who are in our society considered or held up as standards of beauty. And these men are married to these women who are supposed to be the standard of beauty, but yet they still cheat on them. They still cheat on them. So I'm asking the question, why? Why does a man have a beautiful woman, a woman who's there for him his day one, and why does he still cheat on her? Why? Good question. I would like to hear from the brothers. Why? Real talk. Imam Bilal. Huh? No, I want you to. But I just want you to tailor your language. Tailor.
It's in a man's nature to have more than one woman.
It's in a man. You believe that? It's in a man's nature to have more than one. Huh? No. Listen. We have to have respect for people's opinions, even if we don't agree with them. If we don't agree with someone's opinion, we should want to know more of why you believe that. Please elaborate. You said that men are just naturally wired to be with more than one woman. Okay, elaborate.
I sure can if I choose to, but I don't really.
Well, the camera not on you, Sheikh, so you ain't got to worry about your wife, catching no. Huh? Oh, she's okay. You heard it? All right, stop dancing. Come on, give it to me.
I don't know. This is just who I am.
Okay, go ahead.
And more importantly, when a man meets a woman, their first conversation is, if this is who he is, he should tell her. And she accepts him or she rejects him. That's right. When I meet a woman, I tell them, I've never been a one-woman man, I never will be. That's just who I am.
Okay.
So I tell them, it's their choice to be with me or not to be with me. That's right. I don't leave it up to me, I leave it up to them.
For them to decide.
For them to decide.
Okay.
And that's just who I am.
Okay. He said that men are, he said that's right to somebody is on Periscope. They like thumbs up, to be honest from the very beginning. Absolutely. Okay. I want to come back to that because I actually agree with you. And I put some evidence here in my book for that point. Yes.
I think even if a brother or men don't have actually more than one wife or extrasexual relations, the desire is naturally there, especially in this society. You drive up the street and see all kinds of, like you were saying, these women, you could just come from Jumbar and your mind is just like, wow. You know
right.
What I mean? They got their breasts all out, their behinds all out, tight shorts. Like, that does something to you.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So even if you're not acting on it, naturally your desire is already there.
So you're basically concurring with him that men are naturally polygynous.
Even if they don't act on it.
Even if they don't necessarily act on it. Okay. Anybody else? Imam Bilal. Huh?
I'm taking it in. I'm here to learn. We don't need you to listen. We need the imams and the masters to speak on certain things. Give it to him. Make him say something.
Okay, so I agree. I agree that, and I state very emphatically in my book that men are polygynous by nature, similar to what you said. Even if they choose not to act on it, that doesn't mean that men don't desire more than one woman. Right, and there are actually some statistics that I mentioned here in my book about men being naturally polygynous, and that's something that I think that in the Islamic community has been overlooked. I think we tend to, make men equal to women in that regard, and to say, well, because a woman desires one man, then men should only desire one female. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says in the Quran, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرَ كَالْأُنْثَى, and the male is not like the female. Meaning that we're wired differently. We're wired differently. All right, so I'm going to read you a quote from my book. And I know that there's some women out there right now that are pulling their hair out. On page 21, I said, we tend to accept gender differences in the context of women requiring more compassion and attention to their emotional needs, but we seldom consider these nuances as it relates to the natural design of man and his animal impulses. Robert Wright expounded on the genetic strategies behind our sexual preferences as men. Although written from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, as championed by Charles Darwin, I found that many of his observations about the male species explicitly aligned with the inferences made in the Quran. He said, while women can produce 20 or so offspring in a lifetime, one woman, the maximum amount that she can probably produce for one woman is 20 children. A woman cannot produce any more than that. All right. While women can produce 20 or so offspring in a lifetime, men can produce many, many more. Female reproductive availability is therefore scarce and requires males to compete vigorously for it. Since the male reproductive contribution need not exceed one single ejaculation, one would expect males to be eager to engage in sex with as many females as possible. In short, evolution confirms the common observation that males are very eager for sex. Females, meanwhile, have a somewhat different view of things. Females want the best genes and are therefore happy to let males compete with one another to prove the fitness of their genes. However, with fewer potential offspring, it is relatively more important to females that each of those offspring survives to reproductive age. Females then seek male parental investment, that is, males who stick around and help defend the nature of the children, the nurturing of the children, and greatly contribute to the survival of those children. So women, basically what he's saying is that women, they want the best genes, so they will allow men to compete for them, right? Women are, you guys do that. You love it when two men are fighting over you, right? The two alpha men, the ex-husband and the current husband, and you got them, they at each other's throats. And although you'll step in and try to break that up, there's no woman that can tell me that that doesn't do something for you. These two men are fighting over you. You are at the helm of this controversy between these men. All right. While men, on the other hand, because we can reproduce more than women, there's a natural urge for men to have relations with more than one woman. So basically he's saying, confirming the position that Wiley took, and that is that men are polygynous by nature. Now, there's some men that will say, well, I don't want more than one woman. I'm okay with one woman. Okay, but that does not exclude you with the emotional infidelity. And that is, the friendship relationships with women at work, right? Your occasional stroll through Pornhub, your occasional scroll through Instagram, your occasional, longer look at this woman in front of you in line. That doesn't exclude all of that. And that's called emotional infidelity, because there's an emotional attachment to someone other than the person that you are in a relationship with. Don't exclude that as not infidelity. It is. It is actually the worst type of infidelity. When a man creates this, we're married at work, right? These marriages at work, on the job, right? That's my on the job hubby, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Absolutely. Yes. After this is all over, we'll school you to it. It happens. Even amongst Muslims, absolutely. This whole, being at work, and this is my hubby at work, and this is my work hubby, and this is my work boo, right? Or bae at work, right? All of it. It goes on. And while the husband is at home with his wife, he's texting bae at work. Oh, we're just friends. Yeah, but you guys are friends, and your friendship has exceeded just mere friendship, because you are at home with your wife and you are texting another woman. That is more than friendship. You understand what I'm saying? That's more than friendship. Don't say we just friends. No. Your relationship has exceeded friendship a long time ago. Because any friendship that does not have boundaries is not a friendship. That's a relationship. Understand that? Any friendship that does not have any boundaries is no longer a friendship. It's a relationship. If she can walk up to you and touch you on your shoulder, if she can hug you when you walk into work, if she can send you a picture with, her underwear's on, how I look like this, and you respond to that, that is not a friendship. If she can text you knowing that you are at home with your wife and children, and she's sending text messages to you knowing that you are at home, that is not a friendship. Because there are no boundaries there. That is a relationship. So, we need to understand how these things work. So this is emotional infidelity. You've already committed zina, and you don't even know it. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, every child of Adam has his share of zina written for him. He said, when you look, that is the zina of the eyes. When you touch, that is the zina of the hands. When you walk towards or in the direction, that is the zina of the feet. And the private part will either confirm it or deny it. So, although he didn't mention the heart, because that goes without saying, if your heart is connected to another person that you are not married to, better believe that is zina. Better believe. If your hand touching somebody that is haram for you is considered zina, what about your heart being connected to somebody? Understand that. So, these things are, are very important, man. And these are the things that I deal with in this book. All of this. So this is not just, me, bashing women about polygyny. This is not me, telling all of the men I'm actually telling some brothers, stay in your lane. Polygyny ain't even for you. Real talk. Polygyny is not for you. Some men come into Islam. They were Julebib, right? Before Islam. I hate to use that reference, but I got that from Imam Bilal. All right? That's his fault. Some men, prior to Islam, never had a woman look in his direction. Every woman he ever had in his life, he paid for, whether it was a prostitute or whether it was a strip club. You paid for it. Or you with this woman and you buying her bags, you buying her shoes, you paying her rent. You paid for it. Even though she gives you the illusion that y'all in a relationship, you basically a sugar daddy. You paying for everything. Come to Islam, and, the pool of Muslim men are very shallow. So women, unfortunately, you have slim pickings. As I mentioned in the khutbah 2 weeks ago, that if it had not been for Islam, many of us that are married right now wouldn't even be married. And had it not been for the slim pickings of the Muslim men in the Islamic community, many of the Muslim women would not have even selected many of us to marry. Many women put a lot of things to the side to marry some of us. And then you'll have these same men that go out in polygyny. Like, dude, you lucky you in monogamy. Polygyny? Like, how dare you? You don't have a pot to piss in the window to throw it out of. I took you straight out of jail. You came home with nothing. And then now you want to marry another wife. Like, you got to be kidding me. Stay in your lane. Polygyny is not for some people. And I want men to come to that realization. As a man, you should not want to put yourself in a degrading situation. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, may Allah curse the man yahkiru nafsahu, that puts himself in a degrading situation. In a degrading situation, a humiliating situation. Don't put yourself in that situation. So the Sahaba said, O Messenger of Allah, how would a man degrade his own self? The Prophet ﷺ said, because he sees something wrong, sees someone violating one of the limits set by Allah, and then he says nothing. And Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah will ask him, why didn't you say anything? And the man will say, because I was in fear of them. And Allah will say, I am more deserving of your fear than they are. That's how you humiliate yourself. I'm just taking the concept from the hadith. Don't put yourself in a degrading situation. If you know you can't afford it, if you know that you are not sexually, apt to satisfy more than one woman, you barely making the mark with one woman. And then you trying to marry. Look at the Prophet ﷺ. He would go around to all of his wives in one night. And he had 9 at that time. And it said, we used to say he had quwwah to arba'in. He had the strength of 40 men. This ain't for everybody. And I really want brothers to stop thinking that you are like, sisters are like charity cases. And sisters have to stop selling themselves like charity cases. Because what you do is you give life to brothers who want to marry into polygyny who shouldn't be in polygyny. But they know that there's some desperate sister out there that will kindly marry into any situation simply because she just wants to be married. But if every woman stood their ground and, held fast to the principles that they say they have, right? Because, all of the principles go out the window when the right situation arises. Got all of these standards. I ain't marrying no brother like this, and I don't do half, and I don't do this, and I don't do that. But the right situation come up, inshallah, we got a date. We intend it. You intended. Didn't the brother say he didn't have a job yet? Yeah, but inshallah, I'm gonna help him get a job where I'm working. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. We have to stop doing that to ourselves, because when you stand firm in your space and you say, no, I'm not going to accept anything less than this. No, I'm sorry. Then brothers would stop making offers to sisters. I mean, like, sisters are like so desperate. Like, I'll be your fourth wife. How many wives you got, brother? I'll be your fourth wife. You're like, damn, like, is it that serious? Like, you would humiliate yourself to that degree? Are you that desperate? For some women it is. But those minority of women is what gives life to brothers in polygyny that don't need to be in it. That element right there is why some brothers feel comfortable going out into polygyny. It's like brothers don't even come to me. They come to me for the aftermath. After all the drama that happened, it's like, brother Imam, help me get out of this situation, right? They don't come to me when it's like I'm intended to the sister, or I'm having to sit down with this sister for polygyny, because they don't want you to tell them what they know they need to hear. I'm the last person that you come to for that type of advice. You come to me after you done already married, destroyed your first marriage, you done created a disaster in your life, and you need me to come in like a Rubik's Cube and put all the colors all back up together and make it look perfect. But if we was to seek advice, from real people before we got into those situations and heed that advice, you know what I mean? And, we could avoid a lot of the drama and, a lot of the sentiments, the negative sentiments that are centered around polygyny that many of us have in the community. Yes.
Do you think that even if it's like an ideal situation where brother can actually afford it and like he's balanced and stuff like that, you think that the brother needs to be able to manage it, being though women are emotional beings, like it's a lot that comes with it, and I think I just think that sometimes brothers don't take that into consideration, that you have to be able to manage that, because just one woman is a ball of emotions, you know what I mean? So dealing with multiple, is...
No, I got you. So she said, would it even be if it was the most ideal situation where the brother could handle it financially and he would be able to, maintain both households? Would it even be, logical for him to go into polygyny, understanding that you're dealing with multiple women with emotions and feelings and things like this, and being able to be fair with that? Would that even be something that we would recommend? And that is the thing that I'm actually talking about in here, is I'm trying to deter brothers from doing it. When a brother comes to me and says he's looking for polygyny, I'm looking at him like, don't do it. If you only knew, don't do it. If you're not ready to go all the way with this, don't do it, because there's a lot to this. In the back of the book, in the chapter 11, I have some do's and don'ts in polygyny. Right? I'm just going to read one of them just to give you an idea along the lines of what you're talking about. So one of them was, one second, I'm just trying to find this one. Don't compare one wife to the other. All right? The beauty of polygyny lies in the diversity of the women that are involved and the individual experiences the man is going to have with each individual wife. When the husband tries to create a universal experience with each wife, he defeats his own purpose as a man in polygyny. What do I mean by with each and every wife he's going to have a different experience? What does that mean?
Everyone is different.
Every woman is different.
And we don't want to be compared.
Right. So when a man goes to this woman's home, he's going to have an experience with this woman in her home. And when he goes to another woman's house, he's going to have a totally different experience with this woman.
And you leave it there.
And you accept that. You actually embrace that. You enjoy that. That's why you married into polygyny. Because you enjoy the multiple personalities that are contributing to your experience as a man. You embracing that. This wife, you go to this woman's house and she makes spaghetti. I'm just going to use an example, my own personal example, right? I don't like my sauce on top of my spaghetti. I like it separate, right? It's my OCD. Right? So, I don't like it mixed, like the sauce on top of, right? In the same pot. The sauce cooked here and the noodles cooked here, and I'll mix that. I like it on top of that. So one wife cooks it that way. She mixes everything. The noodles and the sauce, everything in one pot, right? And then another wife does it. So if I went to this wife's house and said, I want you to make the spaghetti like this, I'm trying to create a universal experience. Instead of allowing each wife and to be who they are in their element and enjoy each experience as it is. Don't try to create a universal experience. If your bathroom is pink in one house and it's blue in another house, then leave it pink and blue. Don't say my favorite color is blue, and because she entertained me and made the bathroom blue, I'm going to go to this house and I'm going to try to make her make the bathroom blue too. Because what you are now doing is you are dismissing the individuality of each woman.
I think you can ask if something that you prefer, that your wife cook it that way, but don't ever say, so-and-so cooks it like this, because then...
That's even worse. But I wouldn't even say suggest. I would just say, just accept that as it is. You are now conditioning yourself. That's a self-conditioning. That's you conditioning yourself to enjoy the experience the way that it is. When we go to jail, we go to work, whatever the case may be, we accept the experience as it is handed to us. And most of our frustrations in polygyny for both brothers and sisters is trying to make polygyny fit our idea of what a polygynous relationship should be instead of embracing it as it is. We come into the polygynous relationship with preconceived notions about how it should be, and what we read in the Prophet ﷺ's life wasn't all that perfect in polygyny. His wives had issues. It wasn't what we envision as a perfect life in polygyny. The Prophet ﷺ didn't even have that. It's unrealistic. So that is another thing that needs to change. But we have to learn how to accept the experience the way that it is and enjoy it on its terms instead of trying to change it and cookie cut it to fit our perception of what we believe polygyny should be. All right. So, that's one thing to consider. It is also dismissive of the individual personalities and nuances of each wife. Women cook differently, engage in sexual intimacy differently, and respond to the husband's emotional needs differently. And the husband should enjoy each experience exactly the way it is instead of trying to change them all to be on one accord. If two people are the same, then one of you are irrelevant. If you got two wives doing the same exact thing for you, then one of them is not necessary. The world doesn't need another Khadija. The world doesn't need another Aisha. The world doesn't need another you. With your children, you're trying to cultivate your children to be better than you, not like you, better than you. The world does not need another you. So, to speak to your point, yes, it's very important for men to understand the different nuances, the emotional nuances of each and every woman in polygyny. Polygyny can be such a beautiful thing. It can be a beautiful institution of marriage if people are properly educated. And that's what this is trying to do. So while you have some people that says, why is he promoting polygyny? Why is he writing this book on polygyny? And brothers can't even do this. First of all, polygyny is going to be practiced whether you like it or you don't. There's women out there who prefer to be in polygyny rather than monogamy. They are used to being in situations where they're kind of, just doing them. They get up, they don't have like that emotional responsibility like you do in monogamy. In monogamy, you're texting, you're here. And polygyny, some things are just given. You already know your husband is at his other wife's house, so you don't have to text him. You give him that space because you know where he is. All right? He's on his way to you. You know what I mean? He's on his way from leaving her on his way to your house. There are things that you automatically leave room in your head for, so you don't have to pester him about those things. Whereas in monogamy, where you at? Well, why didn't you text me when you left? It's like there's an emotional responsibility there, right? That is not necessarily there in polygyny. Right? When a woman's husband is not there, it's not her weekend, she wants to go hang out with her friends. She don't have to cook for nobody. She don't have to get dressed up for nobody. She ain't got to worry about making no ghusl. Ghusl is heavy, man. Woman go get her hair done, and then 2 days later, she got to make a ghusl. No, real talk. Real talk. She spent $35, $55, $75 to get her hair done, and she takes off her hijab and trying to look nice for her husband, right?
And that's an invite.
Right. To her own destruction, absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
In polygyny, like I was talking to a sister and I wanted to know, like, the time that you spend with one wife versus the other. Do you check up on that wife? Like, suppose she's not hanging out and she's home and it's, like nighttime and, she's alone, in this world. I mean, I was just curious about that.
Absolutely. She's asking if a man is married to 2 women or multiple women and he's not with this particular wife this night, does he call or text and kind of check up on her to see how she's doing? Maybe she's at home alone. Maybe all her children are grown out the house, or maybe she doesn't have any children and she's home by herself. How does the man, help her through, those nights when he's not there, right? When he's absent, right? Yes, a good husband would. A good husband would, right? Call, check up on you. Hey, is everything okay? How you doing? What are you doing? Right? The younger couples, we text the WYD, what you doing, right? And yeah, we use acronyms for everything, man. Just letters for everything. Right. So yes, there is this concern for the other wife. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would come around and he would check on his wives, and she used the comment, she said, min ghairi masis, without sexual relations, meaning his relationships with these women were not sexual, which is why the title of the book is A Man's Perspective on Loving Multiple Women. The Prophet ﷺ was in love with these women. This was not a sexual experience for him, right? There were times, if it was about sex, then what about the women who the Prophet ﷺ refused to marry them? It wasn't about sex. There were hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the woman came and said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, do you have any desire to marry me?" The Prophet looked up and down and turned his head away. "Nah, I'm good." If it was about sex, then he would have just taken advantage of the opportunity. What about the woman that he married? And when he got home, Aisha and Hafsa had told the lady, because they were jealous of her, right? These are games that women play, right? Even amongst the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. So Aisha and Hafsa went to her and told her that when the Prophet comes in to consummate the marriage, seek refuge with Allah from him. He likes when you say that. So when the Prophet walked in the room to consummate the marriage, she said, "I seek refuge with Allah from you." The Prophet said, "Well, you sought refuge with the Most High from me. Go home to your family. You're divorced." He never even touched her. And when he found out that Aisha and Hafsa did that, of course he scolded them for that. But, he took that serious. So if it was about sex, then what about those situations wherein, he didn't, it wasn't about sex for him. So okay, man. All right, I got to let you go. Go on. Enjoy your life. So, it's very important for us to understand that, polygyny is not about sex. And this is where a lot of young men get it messed up. They figure, I'm going to go marry into polygyny because I need more sex. Right? That comes back to haunt you, because if your niyyah, if your intention is not correct going into this, that will manifest itself. At the core of every dysfunction is a lack of sincerity. At the core of every single dysfunctional situation is a lack of sincerity. That will manifest itself. And that's another issue that I mentioned in the book. As Muslims, as an American Muslim community, we oftentimes associate sex with marriage. And when you're ready to have sex, we got to marry you off. When our children start showing sexual tendencies, it's time to marry them off. Sex does not equal marriage. Because a child is ready to have sex does not mean they are ready for the institution of marriage. We have to stop doing this to our children. So they go into the marriage with the expectation that I'm going to have all of my sexual desires met, right? And then after being married, they realize those sexual desires are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. Marriage has failed me, right? So now I've given up on marriage. And now I'm just going to go have a plethora of sexual escapades without being married. This is the condition of many of our children right now because we failed them. We painted a picture of marriage to them that was not reality. We told them, because you're ready to have sex, you start showing sexual tendencies, you're talking to boys, you're looking at boys, time to get you married. And we push her off or push him off into the wilderness of marriage, unprepared, ill-equipped, and they make a mess of their lives, and they come out of that situation with a horrible experience, never wanting to have that again. I ain't getting married no more. Marriage. Who want to get married? Because they had such a horrible experience, including myself. And this is as a result of the Muslim community, because we're not preparing the children for marriage. We're telling them the moment you start showing signs that you're ready to have sex, we got to get you married. We're going to start having sit-downs. Basically, we're telling them that when you get married, all of your sexual desires will go away. They don't. They don't.
Most times they say, trying to save their children from the hellfire.
They're trying to save their children from the hellfire, but they're using marriage to do that. That is an objectification of the institution of marriage. That's not what marriage is for. Divorce is, plentiful in our community. Plentiful in our community. There's probably very few of us in this room who have not experienced divorce, including myself. It's very painful. It's a very painful process. And as an adult, we kind of learn how to pick ourselves up off the ground and stand on our feet and, learn from that experience and then go right back into it again, right? And we have our apprehensions and our fears going into it again. But children, that hurts them. That impact causes them never to want to experience that again. I never want to go through that again. Maybe later, but in the meanwhile, in the interim, they're having relations, in a manner that is haram, and so it's very important that we don't teach our children to associate sex with marriage, and definitely not to associate polygyny with taming that desire. So if you're having this relationship with your wife and you feel like the desire is there, then I'm going to go and marry another wife. You are adding more problems to the problem that you already have. That does not solve the problem. That creates another problem. Taming your desires is not done with marrying another woman. That's a self-responsibility for you to do that on your own. You go and marry someone else and bring them into your space to help you solve a problem that you should be able to do on your own. By fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in the body there's a lump of flesh. If it is healthy and sound, then the whole body will be healthy and sound, including your private part. And if it is corrupt and unhealthy, then the whole body will be corrupt and unhealthy, including your private part. And that part of that lump of flesh is the heart, not another woman in your life. Because you can very well marry another woman and that desire is still there. So what do? Go and marry another one? And you keep marrying until that desire is no longer there? Or do you come to the realization at some point that this is my responsibility, not somebody else's? I need to get married so I can fear Allah. Just think about how ridiculous that sounds. I need to get married so I can fear Allah. And that's jargon that all of us in the Muslim community have bought into. I need to get married so I can fear Allah. Think about how ridiculous that sounds. I need to get married so I can save myself from the hellfire. So what if you can't get married? Then what? Well, Allah knows my condition. MashaAllah, that's the excuse you're going to ride with? Yawm al-Qiyamah, do you really think Allah is going to accept that from you? Allah knows my condition. He sure does. He sure does. You are letting shaitan deceive you, man. You're self-deluded. Allah knows my condition. That's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. So, it's important for us, to be aware of these things. I don't know if there were any more questions or comments. Yeah.
Someone asked a question.
Go ahead. What was it?
She said, although there is a natural competition between women, how do you foster a bond between the wives when they share a husband?
Very good. How do you foster a bond between women when they share a husband, when women are not competitive. Women are territorial. I don't think any woman here would say with a straight face that she's competing with another woman. Men are competitive. Men, that's our nature, to be competitive. You buy a cherry red Ferrari, I'm going to buy a cherry red Bentley. You know what I mean? I gotta outdo you, right? That's our nature, is to be competitive, right? Women's nature is not to be competitive. Women are territorial, which is why they have high levels of jealousy. Jealousy is a fear of losing something that you believe is exclusively yours. That's what jealousy is. It's a fear. It's a fear. Women are territorial, meaning they want this man for themselves. They're not competing with another woman. But sometimes you will find in polygyny, this unfriendly competition where this woman, because she went out and she did this and she saw that the husband responded a certain way, then she figured I can get the same response for him by going and doing the same thing. Right? Whether it is going to get your hair done a certain way, if the woman go gets her hair dyed blonde, then the other wife sees that the husband liked it, and men have to be very careful in polygyny. You have to learn how to be diplomatic. And your tongue can be the most dangerous thing for you in polygyny as a man. Because you exposing something to one wife will upset the order that was going on in that home just because you let that out. Oh, well, such and such got her hair dyed today. And she's like, really?
What color?
What color, right? And don't let women get, sweet talk you into giving you information about another wife. You have to be diplomatic about that. And I actually have, that's actually one of the do's and don'ts in chapter 11. And let me read that to you. I talk about exposing secrets of one wife to another. Do assist in fostering healthy relationships between the co-wives. The Prophet ﷺ gave an allowance to use white lies, which is essentially an exaggeration of a valid truth. All right? It's an exaggeration of a valid truth, right? In order to bring reconciliation between two contending people. And the Prophet ﷺ said 3 situations is not considered a lie. And that's when a man lies to his wife. Right? It's not a lie, not a blatant outright lie. It's an exaggeration of a truth. For example, if your wife cooked a certain food and it was disgusting, you can say to your wife, the food was good. I don't mean this food. I mean your food in general is good. But you are leading her to believe that you are referring to this food. You see how that works? But it's a valid truth that's exaggerated, that is stretched a little bit in order to bring happiness or to bring reconciliation. So if I knew that Wali and Bilal had issues, I could go to Bilal and say, well, Wali told me he loved you, man. And he might have not said that to me in those words. But I'm conveying that to Bilal to give him an idea that you guys need to dead whatever is going on between you because he really has love for you, right? So it's an exaggeration of a valid truth. So if a man is, married to 2 women or multiple women, he could possibly go to one wife and say, well, Khadija, had a lot of good to say about, the overgarment, the shoes you had on today, mashallah. She gave you some really good compliments, and basically you're planting a seed. You're planting a seed. So the next time they cross paths, maybe they only see each other on Jumu'ah. The next time she cross paths, she's going to feel obligated to extend that. Hey, you know what? Your overgarment looks nice, because she's remembering what her husband told her last week. You see how that works? So he's now working diligently to create or foster healthy relationships between the wives. And that's very important for him to do that, right? And there are tons of other things that he can do to do that. However, so how much more would that allowance be granted if it is used to foster a healthy relationship between one family unit? And you have to understand that a man being married to multiple women, that is still one family. That is still one family. That is not, oh, I got my family over here, my family over here. Nah, they're all your family. We only use, I hate the fact that we have to use first wife, second wife, just, to identify the sequence and identify, who was married at what time, because that does play a part. That is very important to women, to be acknowledged as the first wife. Some women take pride in that. They built their whole reputation off of that. I've been married to this man for 20 years. And now he goes and he marries another woman. Like, I'm supposed to just dismiss the fact that he's been married to me for 20 years before she became a factor in our lives? No. And the Prophet ﷺ, he never let Aisha forget that. Aisha said to him, she said, why do you keep mentioning Khadijah when Allah has given you somebody better than him? Dismissing that relationship, that experience that he had with Khadijah. And although Khadijah was deceased, he corrected her. He said, Allah did not give me better than Khadijah. Meaning you are not better than her. She believed in me when nobody else believed in me. She aided me with her wealth when nobody would give me a dime. And she had all of my children. You are not better than her. He never took that away from her. You understand what I'm saying? He never took that away from her. And sometimes a second wife or a third wife, they come in and they expect the husband to just completely dismiss. And we're all equal. No, you're not all equal. I've been married to this woman for 20 years before you were even a factor. You're not all equal. And you have to be comfortable enough as a woman in polygyny to accept that and to respect that. Because the mere fact that you have the luxury of being in polygyny is off the back of this woman who was here that preceded you 20 years ago. You understand what I'm saying? The only reason why you are here is because of her. And in many instances, the first wife prepped you for the second wife. I'm just keeping it 100 with you. The first wife, the reason why you are a factor as a second wife or third wife or fourth wife is because of the first wife. So the Prophet ﷺ, even though Khadijah was deceased, he never allowed anybody to take that away from her. Allah did not replace her with someone that is better. And he recalled all of the things, and that's emotional loyalty. That's emotional loyalty which men don't understand, including myself. New woman come in, we forget all about everything, and we're so inundated, intoxicated with this new woman. And the wife that preceded is like, yo, like, what about all the promises you made to me, all the stuff that you said we would do? Especially if you take this woman, this is a no-no in polygyny, right? The places that you've shared with your other wife, you never take another wife, ever. That is emotional violation, emotional disloyalty. You don't do that. If you and this wife have this restaurant y'all go to on a regular basis, that's your spot. You don't marry another woman and take her to that spot. I wouldn't care if it was across the street and y'all were hungry. We're not going to that spot. There's a certain level of respect that you have to have for the experience. I mean, mind you, a woman in polygyny, she only has you for a fraction of the time that a woman has her husband in monogamy. Right? So the experiences that she has with her husband are her experiences. Don't take that away from her. They're special. Don't take that away from her. And by you dismissing that as, it's just a restaurant. To you, it's just a restaurant. But to her, it has sentimental value. You understand? Even if it's just a restaurant. These are mistakes. Imam Bilal, you holding your head down, shake like, am I tapping into some... Am I taking the tape off of the live wire? Like,
you kicking it.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you covered this before I got here. What about benefits?
What do you mean?
Like, when you marry, insurance, things that, you know, say like if a law calls you back, the husband, what, can you like elaborate a little bit on that? Because sometimes that's a little difficult.
Well, if we're talking about benefits, were you talking about health benefits?
Health benefits or life benefits or
Life insurance and things like that?
Everything that's
Okay.
left over, like, you know, different houses.
Well, I don't necessarily have a life insurance policy. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my life insurance policy. When he calls me back, whatever I have will be distributed amongst my children as Allah dictated in the Quran. So that's my life insurance policy. You have some people, Muslims, who have bought into this idea of having a life insurance policy. They've taken out 100,000, 200, $500,000, whatever, and they pay a certain portion every month. Wallahu a'lam whether that's even permissible Islamically. Nonetheless, for those who do have that, whatever monies are left behind, that is to be distributed amongst the family members as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dictates in the Quran.
But what about your job? Suppose you have a job and you have insurance benefits. Who goes on the insurance?
Well, obviously the first wife is probably the one who will capitalize off of that. However, it is the wife's responsibility in the event that the husband is deceased to make sure that that wealth is distributed. Now, if the woman decide to become territorial at that moment, which will probably not be the most optimal time to be territorial, because now you are playing with money that is a right of those children that are his children. And if that money does not reach the hands of those children, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, then you will be accountable before Allah, Yawm al-Qiyamah. And you have some women who take the position that, you know, well, he was married to me first and I'm on his insurance policy and blah, 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 blah. And he's the second wife. And in America, Islam, you know, the American society doesn't acknowledge, you know, so technically that's not, and you can run the technically stuff all you want. Islamically, and under the amendment of freedom of religion, he is allowed to practice polygyny because his religion decides that. And if you decide as a woman to say, well, I'm securing this for my children, they're all his children. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? Like as his sons, they take more than the mother. They take more than you in terms of inheritance. So, I mean, you know, it's very important. It's very dangerous. But that's a good question. That is a good question. But the husband should, if he is in polygyny, what he should do is write a will. Every man should have a will. And in that will, it should be stipulated what should be given to who and based on what. You know, not to leave that to the women to decide, because death changes everything. We see that even with our non-Muslim families. You know what I mean? One of our non-Muslim family members died. The moment they put in the ground, we fighting over, you know, the house, fighting over the car, fighting over this and that. People get real ugly when death is on the table. You know, and that even applies to Muslims. We're not exempt from that. We're not exempt from that.
If you want to at one time practice polygamy, do you recommend that a brother get married in court with his first wife? Because you can only do that one time.
I can't say, I always recommend brothers to get married legally. That's important for the security of the marriage. And then, of course, in certain instances, they don't recognize the Islamic marriage unless it's done. You know, for example, if you want to put your wife on your insurance, some insurance companies don't acknowledge the marriage certificate from the masjid. So you have to go get married legally. I personally ran into that problem myself with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. They would not take my marriage certificate from the masjid. I had to go get married legally. And at the time, I didn't have multiple wives at that time. You know, and so then polygyny becomes a factor later on. What do you do? I mean, it is what it is. You can't go and reverse that process. I mean, it is what it is. But I wouldn't say don't get married legally. But, you know, being married legally will only be to one wife, obviously, you know. Yes.
Do you think that African American Muslim women are spoiled? And I ask that question because, you know, different parts of the world, like you mentioned earlier, like Africa specifically, different parts of the world, Muslim women expect to be one of multiple wives, one of, you know, many wives. Do you think that
are spoiled?
Very good question. Good question. She said, do I think that Muslim women or African American Muslim women, and not just African American, just Muslim women in America, period. American Muslim women, are they spoiled? Because women in other countries already expect to be in polygyny. They expect their husbands are going to marry multiple women, or they're going to be one of 3 or one of 2 or one of 4, right? And Muslim women in America tend to, write that off as that's not going to happen in my house. I'm going to marry my husband and it's just going to be me and him. I wouldn't say that they're spoiled. I just would say that their expectations are in sync with the society that we live in. And in our society, monogamy is the standard, but there's this intersectionality, right? That we're American Muslims. So we're going to have an American experience, but that American experience is also going to overlap with our Islamic experience. And we have to leave room that polygyny is a part of Islam. And when we say, I'm going to get married and polygyny is not a factor, and basically you're just having an American experience. And Islam is not, and you have many, especially foreigners, they're having a completely American experience. It's not an Islamic experience. They're Muslim, but they're having an American experience with Islam, which is why the hijab is not an obligation for them. They can take it off because it's just a scarf.
But it's
That's
mostly in the African American community that polygyny is practiced. In this,
well, the reason why, in my opinion, the reason why polygyny is prevalent amongst African Americans is because when you look at foreign Muslims that come from Arab countries or Indian or Asian predominantly Asian countries, polygyny is not a factor in their countries either. In some places it's actually banned. In so-called Muslim countries, it's banned. And then you have some countries like, for example, the UAE. I was in the UAE since August, and that was the first time I had ever been exposed to polygyny as a society. They actually give stipends to the men in their country to take on second wives because they have such an influx of women in the community, and a lot of the Emiratis, they marry outside of the Emirates. They marry women from Malaysia, they marry women from Indonesia, they marry Caucasian women from other parts of the world. So that leaves a huge deficit for the women, the citizens. They're already minorities in their own country. Yes, Emiratis are minorities in their own country. The expats are actually the majority. So they actually give extra incentives for financial, assistance for men who want to take on second wives. So you have some countries where it is practiced, but for the vast majority of the Muslim world, polygyny is not practiced like that. It's usually reserved for sheikhs, imams, and people who have wealth, money, rich people. The common folk, the lay people, they don't engage in polygyny. That's unheard of.
But
It's,
even because as you can imagine, I have had so many conversations leading up to that.
Mhm.
And, even like I've talked to some sisters, and I'm like, even if it's not for you, because it's not for everybody.
right.
It's like they don't accept it. Like, this is what Allah said. This is in the Quran. This is not. It's like almost denying it.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes like we've gotten so. That's why I said spoiled, because it's just like, okay, maybe it's not for you. Maybe this is not what you want, but you still have to accept it. And they almost like they don't even want to accept it.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
like,
I agree.
what is that?
I agree. Maybe we can have some of the other women elaborate on that. Why do you think that there's such an aversion?
Let somebody else put their hand up.
I'm gonna have multiple women.
I already know that. Alhamdulillah.
What do you guys think is the reason why women just will not accept polygyny?
Before I accepted Islam, the man I was with, we were together for years. We got into Islam, and I told him outright, I'm the only wife.
Right.
I am the only wife. But after we were together for 25 years. After before we broke up, I got to the point where, look, please go and get another wife. I was ready to share him with somebody else. And he was like, I don't want another wife. No, I want you to be with somebody else. But we haven't been together now, and lo and behold, he got another wife and married her. So we, after 25 years, it got to the point where at one point there was no way there'll be a second wife.
Right.
But then finally it was like, please, go find another woman. I don't mind sharing you. You know, it
So-
get back to that point.
Okay, so again, why do you think there is such an aversion, almost to the point of denial? You know, Muslim women in America deny the fact that polygyny is a part of our religion, and they want absolutely nothing to do with it.
We have to be educated.
Yeah.
Okay.
We come into Islam possibly because we met a brother and we become Muslim. But we're not educated. We don't know Allah enough to say we accept Islam. I mean, we accept polygamy. Until we get closer to Allah. And our relationship is between us and Allah, and not just us and our husband.
Right.
And we have to understand that our husbands don't belong to us.
Absolutely.
They belong to Allah, just like we belong to Allah.
That's real
So
truth.
it makes it a lot easier once we become educated. So the whole thing is based on us educated.
So it's basically a fear because of a lack of knowledge. Is that what?
I was thinking fear, insecurity, and ego.
Okay, ego. Elaborate. I didn't know women had egos.
Jealousy.
And we're coming out of Christianity, where there's no polygamy in Christianity.
Right.
As far as we know, it is in the Bible, but they say that was taken out. So we're coming from Christianity, and there's no polygamy. So then we come into a religion where brothers are talking about 3 and 4 wives. You have to learn to accept it. If you accept Islam, this is a part of Islam.
So
Okay.
one of the things is like, this is my man, and you know, that whole territorial thing that you talk about.
Right.
This is my man.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think part of the not able to accept it is that they're not accepting the piece that, like you said, the Islamic, you know, permission. You know, they still stuck in the, I don't want to say dunya, but it's in the, I get the American way of,
Right.
you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, the traditional this society that's
Right.
non-Muslim.
Right.
This is my man.
Right.
And you do what I say, or you know, this is not what I want. And the I's get caught up in it. You know, and it's not like a we thing or what's going on with the husband. I mean, do the husband need to be in polygamy?
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
protect him. I mean, like being a little bit more open to like your husband. You know your husband.
Right.
You know. So.
Okay. That's a good observation.
I think my point, how I feel about it is, yes, you can have another wife. But what scares me is trifling women. Because everybody's hygiene is not up to par, and men go with anything. They don't have, I mean, just.
Well, that now becomes the responsibility of the Islamic community.
Finish my point.
Yeah, sorry.
When you out here and you look at young adults and they're doing whatever they do, I mean, now, I'm 45. But the things that I see 20-year-olds do, they go from A to Z the first time. I'm like, there's no level of intimacy between people, and with the rapid HIV and AIDS and other hepatitis C in our communities or whatever, I just wouldn't want to deal with that. Now, I know I have a good husband, and I know that he would probably deal with poor women fairly, because he deals with me fairly. He's just a good guy, you know? But I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about now you introducing something else to me,
Right.
into my space. You know what I mean? So I guess that would be a fear.
And it's a legitimate fear.
You know what I mean?
It's a
But
legitimate.
outside of that, I'm sorry, I'm not really nice, but I'd snap somebody's neck if she brought some craziness to my space that I have never dealt with before. When it's something new to you, oh yeah, then, you know, being able to rationalize and have critical thinking skills go all out the door when someone is just trifling and just not, that's, you know.
I agree.
I think men smell is good, because I just be like, I don't know how I just don't get it. So, y'all can pretend and all of that, I can't
How? Did you show how change? I wanted to get both of you. Well, I only have one of these, so you want to take this one? Okay. So that's 35. She doesn't have change.
Can you change it there?
Yeah, I can change it. I'll change it. Just give me a second. Let me see if anybody. Okay, so inshallah, that will conclude our session. If there's anyone who would like to purchase the book, I have the book here with me for $25, inshallah, $24.99. The book is available online for those of you who are online and want to purchase the book online. You can purchase the book via PayPal, and the PayPal account is rproductions@rawdah, RAWDAH.info. rproductions@rawdah.info. Inshallah ta'ala, you can pay for the book online, and we will ship the book to you directly, inshallah. Yes and no. I'll show you how to do it after. You have an email? So what I'll do is I'll send the PayPal request. Yeah, I don't. But what we do is we send the PayPal request to your email, and then you can just click on the request from your email and just pay it straight from there. Yep.
Oh, it's my I got a book. It's my titanium and these killer.
Oh man, alhamdulillah. Thanks for coming out.
But I moved into Connecticut.
Okay.
For 2 months.
Okay.
And then because I'm ready to open a restaurant, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do.
Okay.
So we see each other.
Inshallah. Thanks for coming out. Alhamdulillah.
Sure. How much is this?
25.
25.
Yes.
This the one for 35.
So let me ask you a question. Why did you say I didn't want women to have ego?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I never thought about that.
Is it ego?
I don't know what you mean. Because we have jealousy. Is that what
Well, jealousy is one thing. Ego is that internal man, that man inside of you that projects this image and will do any. It's like the. I was listening to this